two universes. One where all the women go extinct, one where all the men go extinct. Which one survives? So I posted this poll on the VOV Instagram story, and the results are crazy. Not crazy in the way that you might think, but they're shocking. So there's 63 total votes in the end. And I mean, I thought it was an interesting question. I talked about it to my family. I talked about it with friends because I thought, there's good reasons for both arguments, for both sides. But the final vote went to the women. 62% to 38% voted that the women would survive longer. And there's plenty of good reasons for that. But what's crazy, what's super interesting is that it turns out if you look at the vote split by gender, the men voted 24 to 17 for men. So the men were a bit in favor of themselves. It was about a 59% to 41% split that the men would make it through. The women, on the other hand, voted 22 to 0 for themselves. So every single, I wish I was making this stat up. I wouldn't prove it, but obviously there's privacy concerns with that, so I'm not gonna reveal everybody's name. But it was 22 to 0 for women. Now, once again, there's perfectly logical reasons for both arguments, but the fact that every single woman voted for the women, I think is a huge red flag. It's a huge problem. And for me, I mean, I personally voted for the men, but once again, there's good reasons for both. I think it boils down to infrastructure. For the men to survive, it's basically a battle of the men's will to maintain the infrastructure and the women's ability to maintain the infrastructure, because a lot of the jobs that maintain survival, you could say, are completed by men, whether it's trailer mechanics or plumbers or guys working on the oil rigs. Not that women can't do these jobs, but I think that the learning curve it would take to train hundreds of thousands of women, millions of women, if you want to talk about the world stage for sure, to do these jobs would be too much for them to be able to pull through compared to the men.
Especially if there's no men to train them.
There you go. Well, then there's the opposite argument, because I gave that argument, right? I gave that argument. Shout out to the cameraman, by the way, episode 70. If you want me to bleep that out because you don't want to be included in this, you just let me know. But, what were we saying? Yeah, so I gave that argument, right? Like, okay, there would be no men to train these women. And I heard a good counter argument. It's like, okay, well, actually look at a scenario where the women were able to upkeep the infrastructure. World War II. All the men had to go fight in war, and you had women come into the workforce, and they were able to keep things running. So I was like, okay, it's an interesting argument, right? You also have to worry about male aggression now that there's no women, because when I say men's will to maintain the infrastructure, I'm screaming here. I'm at a dead spot. I need to calm down a little bit. When I say men's will to maintain the infrastructure, I'm talking about a huge reason that men even go to work is for their women. You take away a man's wife or his daughter, like a lot of dudes would just kill themselves straight up, right? So that's where I think, anyways, it's an interesting argument. The whole point is that it's not an easy question. It's not like an obvious one side or the other. But the fact that you have 22 to 0, if you even did the odds of that mathematically, it would be basically impossible to get. If you had to flip 22 tails in a row, it's essentially impossible to do that. So there's clearly a third variable lurking in the atmosphere that is influencing these women. That is influencing these women to vote all the same way. And the one thing that these women have in common, because they follow VOV, the audience, the follower base, is largely university students. So they're all women who are attending university. Now, the purpose of university, I thought, was education. But what would you call a place where a group of people go into, and then after being in that place, they leave all thinking the exact same way? I don't know if you would call that education. I think you might be able to call that indoctrination. If you did that same poll in Afghanistan and you asked 22 women who would survive, who would be able to maintain the society for longer, no matter women, they'd all be voting men, because we'd have no issue calling that indoctrination if 22 Afghanistan women voted one way. But for some reason now here in Canada it's flipped, but it's not. That surely isn't indoctrination. So I bring up this argument again. I talked to a few very smart women in my life, and they heard that argument. They're like, okay, yeah, that could be part of it for sure. Another part of it, we talked about that third variable. There has to be some sort of confounding variable in this equation. Could be that something that all these women have in common is the type of men they're surrounded by. They're all U of T students. Your average U of T man is punk ass bitch, okay? So it's not a good example, I don't think, to if you're gonna judge like U of T men. I was gonna drop some names, but let's avoid that. If you're gonna judge the male probability of survival based off of the men at U of T, I'd probably go with the women as well, because U of T, the average U of T male is basically a chick without the emotional intelligence. So completely fair. Interesting point. But another argument, once again, I said it was university. It could just be social media, honestly, because social media is way faster than university. I like to take any opportunity I can to slam universities. But if we're being completely honest, they do a bit of indoctrination, but I think a lot of it goes through social media, because social media is faster than traditional education, and it's personalized to what you want to see. So that's hard break there.
Yeah, social media is the reason I think Michelle Obama has a
So social media influences people, maybe particularly women in this case, because it makes them believe that they should compare themselves to men, or they should be competing with men. A lot of what women's social media feeds are is other women telling their stories of awful bad experiences they've had with men. It's cathartic in some sense. It's like they all group in. They're like, oh my goodness, why are men like this? Men's social media feeds are Michelle Obama with a dick, or
racist jokes,
or like oil tankers exploding on the highway. That's about it. If there is going to be some sort of indoctrinating influence, it's not going to be about this question, about these types of issues when it comes to male, female. That's why the men in this case, the reason I said that the women in particular are being indoctrinated at university, not all of them, of course, but 22-0 speaks for itself, is because the male vote went pretty balanced. It was 59% to 41%. That, to me, looks like a group of people who took a second to think, like, okay, this is an interesting question. There are definitely multiple scenarios where men could survive, and women could survive. The women, on the other hand, I have a hard time believing that amount of thought went into it, instead of being like a knee-jerk reaction, I don't need no man, click, sort of process that went down.
Period.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. If you are a smart woman, you can DM the Voices of Vic account, share what you think. And if you want to know if you are a smart woman, what do you mean if you're a smart woman? If any of this offended you, that's probably not you. So,
oh no.
Thank you for watching. And we'll get back to the road. Thanks also shout out to the man himself behind the camera.